Hey everybody, welcome back to the K2N Online Paddle School. We're back here on YouTube with another paddle tip episode, and today we're talking about some of the differences paddling in a team boat versus a single boat. And today we're going to talk about the seated orientation within a dragon boat and an OC-6. This is in direct contrast to an outrigger canoe specifically. In an outrigger canoe, you have to have both feet forward in order to engage the steering mechanism. But in a larger OC-6 and a dragon boat, you are not responsible for using a steering mechanism, and you have an open inside cockpit area, and you can orient your legs however you'd like. This change in your leg orientation is going to dictate how your hips and body can move freely within the canoe. So I do want to preface with this series going into dragon boat and OC-6 specifically that the number one thing that you can contribute to a team dynamic is paddling with your team. So paddling the same exact way that the rest of the crew is paddling is most ideal for moving a boat effectively. This series is going to try to help spotlight ways that crews in their entirety can change their movement to match up better, as well as create more force throughout the stroke. Many of the principles are exactly the same that we're trying to do in the single boats. If you can bring that ideology into a team dynamic, the boat can only move faster. And the major component that we always talk about is how we're utilizing our hips. With the freedom of motion to move your legs around, this is going to change the orientation of your hips, and it's also going to change how you can shift your weight throughout the boat. Those are the two ideas that we're talking about, is how the different leg orientations allow you to shift your weight and engage your leg drive, as well as looking at your overall posture with your abdomen to connect that energy from the lower body to the upper body. So the first thing that we want to talk about is the leg orientation leading into our weight shift. Ideally, we want to have the outside leg forward. So if I'm taking a right side stroke, we want the right leg forward. The reason for this is it pushes your right hip forward into the stroke. This allows us to use this lead leg to power the paddling side hip throughout the stroke. This also extends out your center of gravity into the front part of the stroke more. So with my orientation here, as I paddle on the right side, if I have this right leg forward, I am now extending this hand much further out, further in front of me. And if I move my left leg to match my right leg, my hips are now going to be much more square. I can still turn my hip into it, but not the same way as if I literally move my leg. Common orientation that you will see is the goofy foot stance, where you're going to have the opposite leg forward and your paddling side leg is going to be tucked in under you like so. What this does is it actually turns this hip backwards. And so now as you start the stroke, pushing this hip forward takes a lot more flexibility and movement, and the best that you can get is only having this hip slightly in the front. Switching the leg orientation, you can now push this hip much further forward. We're taking these strokes, we want to try and extend out the reach in front of us the most that we can while maintaining our leverages. By simply moving our legs, we can get free motion in the front with no extra effort. Being in the seated position specifically limits how much motion we have with our hips. So if we have our paddling side leg back, our hips can't move freely to make up for this motion. In a kneeling position, like being in a sprint canoe, you can overcome this because your hips can move through space more effectively. The other aspect of a sprint canoe is you're using your paddle to steer the vessel, which occurs behind you. So being oriented in a way that moves your paddle behind you is a necessary evil in order to steer the vessel. In a dragon boat or an OC-6, we don't need the paddle behind us for the steering leverage. We are only focused on forward strokes, and that can all occur in front of us. So once we've established having this outside leg forward, now we can establish the weight shift. The idea that we're always looking for is moving our weight from our sit bones to in front of us on our feet. In an outrigger canoe with both feet in front of us, it's a little trickier, but when you only have one leg in front of you, it is much easier to direct your body weight onto this lead leg. The best exercise to think of is lunges. As you come up and down, lunging onto your lead leg, it's very easy to engage your quadricep with your body weight. When we are taking paddle strokes, we are trying to find the same connection with the lead leg. Very common mistake is people have this outside leg forward and it just sits there dead sideways on the ground and they're not really pushing and activating it. The reason for this is there is not an adequate amount of weight shift. As you have this lead leg forward, as you begin to tilt forward, this foot should push into the ground with the same force as a lunge. If all of my weight remains on my sit bones, there's no weight on my foot and it can move freely around in front of me. This weight shift forward is necessary to keep the posture that we're looking for throughout the stroke. We are trying to maintain our posture. There is space between the edge of your hip bones and the very bottom of your rib cage. This spacing here needs to stay as large as possible to create this upright posture. Breaking posture is collapsing this distance. So if I fold here, my rib cage and my hip are almost touching each other and this side starts to stretch out and you can see I've lost my posture. When somebody lines up to go through these dynamic motions, if they collapse their posture and go through, it looks very silly, right? But if I go through a paddle stroke like this, this is a very common motion and position that you will see. The issue with this is as you break at your posture, the amount of leg motion and weight shift that actually makes it through your spine to your hands is highly limited. Only by keeping the spacing here allows your body and hip motion to make it to the upper body. If I collapse here and move my hips, my hands don't move, meaning that that energy and that kinetic chain has been broken at my midline. So the very common examples of these ideas not coming together would be not having adequate weight transfer from the sit bones to the lead foot, so all my weight is on my butt, and I'm breaking at my posture each time I take the strokes, and you will see people have an excessive amount of body motion. There is some force that you can get by throwing your torso down onto the stroke and using only your top arm to drive down at the shoulder and using these small muscles, but it is not as effective as using the whole body to get all of those same leverages and connect your lower body into the equation. In a team boat, you are gonna have a gunnel, which you can literally lean on, which kind of facilitates breaking at your posture because you're almost leaning on the boat like a crutch to keep you from falling over. No leg drive, no weight transfer, and no upright posture to go through the motion. You can see how we devolve into very limited leverages if we're not approaching the stroke correctly. Having the lead leg to push off of, to power the hip, keeping the posture to make that energy come to the shoulder, you can be much more dynamic with your motion if you put these pieces together. So have the lead leg forward, work on that weight transfer from sit bone to lead leg to push off of to really create leg drive. Keep your upright posture and turn into the stroke, then lean forward, and you'll find that you will have a much better connection in the water for longer. Thank you all so much for checking out the YouTube series. If you guys have any topics that you want to see ongoing, even this video topic has been brought to you by people emailing me asking to see more team boat components. This is the first part of that series, and we will break down more and more of the body, as well as working on team synchronization and anything that goes into team boat paddling. Don't forget to subscribe so you can see these videos as they come out, as well as checking out the K2N vlog. And if you want details just like this and more, check out the K2NOnlinePaddleSchool.com today. We have 300 full-length videos. It opens up access to working directly with a coach. We can write you training plans, we do video reviews, or all kinds of things to help you remotely remotely with a coach to reach your goals. I want to give a quick shout out to all of our channel members, and their names are going to appear here. Thank you all so much for the support, and we'll see you all next week for the next episode of the Paddle Tip series.